The morning of my daughter's grand opening, I ironed my best shirt. The navy one Margaret had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. I told myself I was being sentimental. Looking back now, I think some part of me already knew I needed armor. My name is not important. What matters is that I spent 31 years building something with my hands, my savings, and eventually, my retirement. I was an electrician out of Sudbury, Ontario. Worked the mines, worked the subdivisions, worked every cold site that would have me from October through March when most men stayed home. I am 64 years old. I have 2 children, a daughter named Vanessa and a son named Daniel. This story is about what happened the night Vanessa opened the wellness clinic I paid for, and why I will never apologize for what I did afterward. Vanessa was always the one with the vision. Even as a girl, she would rearrange her bedroom furniture and call it a renovation. She studied kinesiology at Laurentian, then took a certificate in registered massage therapy, then spent 2 years working at a clinic in Barrie, before telling me she was ready to open her own place. She had a business plan printed and bound. She sat across from me at my kitchen table in the house I had owned for 22 years, and she showed me projections and rental costs and equipment lists. Her eyes were bright. She looked exactly like her mother did when she was 33. Her mother has been gone 11 years now. I said yes before she finished the second page. What I agreed to was not a gift. We were both clear about that, or so I believed. I cashed out a significant portion of my RRSP, $43,000, which after the withholding tax and the income tax hit at filing meant I absorbed nearly $15,000 in penalties and clawbacks that year alone. I also put a second mortgage on my house, not a large one, $28,000, enough to cover the leasehold improvements, the treatment tables, the booking software, the signage, and the first 3 months of operating costs. I had a lawyer draw up a simple loan agreement, 5% interest, repayable over 7 years, beginning 18 months after opening day. Vanessa signed it at that same kitchen table. She hugged me for a long time. She said, "Dad, I will never forget this." I believed her. The clinic opened on a Friday evening in late September, the kind of September evening in Ontario where the air still carries warmth, but the light has already started to go amber early, and you can feel the edge of October underneath everything. Vanessa had rented the space in a professional building just off the main street in Barrie, 3 treatment rooms, a reception area with a small retail section for the products she stocked, soft lighting, that particular smell of eucalyptus and cedar that I would always associate with her from that night forward. She had told me the opening reception started at 6. She said it was for clients, referral partners, local business contacts. She said, "Dress nicely, Dad." I did. I wore the navy shirt. I drove down from Sudbury that afternoon, stopped for gas outside Parry Sound, arrived at the building at 10 minutes to 6. There was a woman at the front desk inside the lobby. Not one of Vanessa's staff. A coordinator of some kind, hired for the event. She had a clipboard and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She asked for my name. I told her. She looked at the clipboard, looked again, ran her finger down the page a second time. She said she didn't see me on the list. I told her I was Vanessa's father. She said she would need to check and asked me to wait near the entrance. I stood there for 6 minutes. I counted them. I watched people walk past me through the frosted glass door into the reception area. I could hear music and laughter and the particular sound of a room that is pleased with itself. I stood near the entrance of a building I had helped pay for, in a shirt my late wife had chosen, and I waited to be let in. Vanessa came out eventually. She was wearing a cream-colored blazer, and her hair was done, and she looked polished and happy, and for a moment I felt only pride, the deep, uncomplicated kind. Then I saw her face shift when she saw me. Not into happiness, into something more like calculation. She said, "Dad, I didn't think you'd make it down." I told her I had told her 2 weeks ago I was coming. She said she knew. She just meant with the drive and everything. She said the list had gotten complicated. There were so many people, she had lost track. She was smiling while she said it. The coordinator was watching us. Vanessa said, "Let me find you a spot to stand. The room is pretty full." Not a seat, a spot to stand. I followed her inside. The room was not full. There were perhaps 40 people. There were chairs along the walls and a low table with wine and sparkling water and small plates of food. Vanessa guided me to a corner near the retail shelving. She said, You can see everything from here." And then someone called her name from across the room, and she turned and walked toward them and did not look back. I stood in the corner next to the display of cedar-scented lotions, and I watched my daughter work the room. I watched her introduce the man beside her. I did not know him. I would learn later his name was Marcus, that they had been seeing each other for 4 months, that she had not mentioned him to me because she said things were still new. I watched her laugh and touch people's arms and accept a glass of Prosecco from a tray. I watched her give a short speech in which she thanked her mentors, her staff, her loyal clients, and Marcus for his support during the build-out. She did not say my name. I waited. I thought perhaps she had forgotten in the nerves of the moment. I stood there for an hour and 20 minutes, and she did not say my name, and she did not bring anyone over to meet me. And at one point she passed within 3 feet of me while talking to a woman in a yellow dress, and she did not stop. I set down the glass of sparkling water I had been holding, and I walked out. I did not make a scene. I did not say anything to her. I walked past the coordinator with the clipboard and out through the lobby and into the September evening, and I sat in my truck for a while. The air had gone cool while I was inside. I could see my breath. I sat there for perhaps 20 minutes, and then I drove to the Comfort Inn on Dunlop Street, where I had booked a room, and I ordered a club sandwich from the restaurant. And I sat at the small desk in my room, and I opened the notes application on my phone, and I began to write down everything I remembered. Not because I was angry. I want to be clear about that. I was not angry that night. I was something quieter than anger. I was a man who had just watched his daughter erase him from the story he had funded, and I was beginning to understand, clearly and without drama, what that meant. I drove home to Sudbury the next morning. Vanessa texted me around noon that day. She said, "So good you can make it. Hope the drive back was okay." That was the entire message. I read it twice. I put my phone down and I went out to the garage and I found the file folder where I kept financial documents, and I sat at the kitchen table and I read the loan agreement. My lawyer's name is Patricia. I have used her for small things over the years, a will update, a property matter when my neighbor put up a fence 2 feet over the survey line. I called her that Monday morning and I asked her what my options were regarding the agreement. She asked me to bring in the paperwork. I did. Patricia read it carefully. She said it was a valid promissory note. She said the 18-month grace period would end in approximately 4 months, at which point the repayment schedule would begin. She said if payments were not made according to the schedule, I had the right to pursue collection, including applying for a judgment lien against business assets. She also noted that I had retained a security interest in the major equipment items listed in the schedule attached to the agreement: the treatment tables, the commercial-grade HVAC unit, the booking and billing system hardware. Because Vanessa had agreed to that clause at signing and I had registered the interest with the PPSA, the Personal Property Security Act registry in Ontario, as my lawyer had advised at the time, I had not fully understood what that registration meant when I signed. I understood it now. I want to say something here because I think it matters. I did not leave that office intending to destroy my daughter's business. That was never what I wanted. What I wanted for those 4 months was a phone call. I wanted Vanessa to call me and say, "Dad, I'm sorry about the opening. I got caught up. It wasn't right how I handled it." I wanted her to ask how I was doing. I wanted her to remember that I existed in her life as something other than the line on the funding document. She called me twice in those 4 months. Once to ask if I had her grandmother's pie recipe somewhere in my things. Once to tell me she'd be spending Christmas with Marcus's family in Halifax and hoped I understood. I said I understood. She did not ask what I would be doing. I spent Christmas with my son Daniel and his wife Carol and their 2 kids at their place in Timmins. Daniel is not the child with the vision. He is the child who calls every Sunday and shows up with firewood in November and does not ask for anything. His kids call me Grandpa Don. We watched the Leafs game and ate too much and fell asleep in the living room, and it was the best Christmas I had in years. In January, the first repayment under the loan agreement came due. Nothing arrived. I waited 2 weeks. I sent Vanessa a text message that said only, "The first payment under our agreement was due on January 15th. Please let me know when to expect it." She replied 3 days later. She said the clinic was still getting established and cash flow was tight, and she had assumed I would be flexible given that I was her father. She said she would sort it out soon. I forwarded that message to Patricia. Patricia sent Vanessa a formal notice of default by registered mail. Vanessa called me that same evening. I did not recognize the tone of her voice at first. She was not the polished woman in the cream blazer. She was furious. She said I was being vindictive. She said she couldn't believe I had gotten a lawyer involved. She said this was a family matter, and I was treating her like a stranger. I let her finish. Then I said, Vanessa, I stood in a corner at your opening for an hour and 20 minutes, and you did not introduce me to a single person in that room, and you did not say my name in your speech. I am not treating you like a stranger. I am holding you to an agreement you signed. Those are different things. She hung up. 3 more weeks passed. No payment. A second formal notice went out. Patricia informed me that if I wished to proceed, we could begin the process of enforcing the security interest in the registered equipment. I told her to proceed. What followed was not fast or dramatic. It was paperwork and registered letters, and a waiting period required under Ontario law. Vanessa hired her own lawyer. There were 2 rounds of correspondence. Her lawyer argued that the equipment was integral to the operation of the business, and seizure would constitute undue hardship. Patricia responded that the security interest had been properly registered and disclosed, that Vanessa had signed acknowledging it, and that my client had made every reasonable effort to resolve the matter without enforcement, which I had. In late March, Vanessa called me again. This time there was no fury. She sounded tired. She asked if there's any way we could talk. I said yes. We met at a Tim Hortons in Barrie, which felt appropriately Canadian and appropriately unglamorous for the conversation we needed to have. She looked thinner than she had at the opening. She was not wearing the blazer. She had her hair in a ponytail, and she was holding her coffee with both hands. She said she was sorry about the opening. She said she had gotten overwhelmed by the event and by Marcus's presence, and she had handled it badly, and she knew that. She said she was sorry about Christmas. She said she had convinced herself that because the money was a loan and not a gift, the emotional weight of it was somehow separate, manageable, something she could deal with later. She said she understood now that there was no later, that I was her father and I had given up my retirement savings and my home equity, and she had stood me in a corner and walked past me. I listened to all of it. Then I told her what I had decided. I was not going to seize the equipment. I was not interested in getting the clinic she had built. What I wanted was the agreement honored, with a revised payment schedule that Patricia and her lawyer had already drafted that gave her an additional 6 months of reduced payments to account for the slow start. I also told her that I was transferring the secondary security interest, a smaller registered interest in the retail inventory and software licenses, to Daniel, not as punishment to her, as recognition of him, because he had never asked me for anything, and he had given me the best Christmas I could remember. And his kids called me Grandpa Don, and that meant something. Vanessa looked at the table for a long time. Then she said, "That's fair." We signed the revised agreement a week later in Patricia's office. Vanessa and I drove separately and left separately. We did not hug, but she looked at me when she signed and she said, "I won't forget this time," and I believe she meant it differently than she had the first time. I drove back to Sudbury on a Thursday afternoon in April. The highway was wet from an earlier rain, but the sky had cleared, and there was that particular northern Ontario light that makes the rock cuts look almost purple. I stopped for coffee at the Muskoka Service Center and sat at a table by the window and watched the trucks go by. I thought about what it costs to be erased quietly by someone who loves you but has stopped seeing you. I thought about how easy it is to mistake someone's patience for an absence of limits. I thought about the navy shirt still hanging in my closet, and the woman who had given it to me, and the fact that she would have known exactly what to say at that Tim Hortons meeting, and it would have taken her about 90 seconds. I thought about Daniel's kids asleep on the couch in Timmins with the game still on. I paid for my coffee and I got back in the truck and I drove north. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like a man waiting for someone to remember him. I felt like a man who had simply reminded them